Hi everybody and welcome to Heel Heat. My name is George Coles, and on this episode we're going to talk about Joe Hendry. More specifically, what I think his potential in WWE is, what his ceiling is, where I think he'll end up. And in case you're not familiar or you don't know, Joe Hendry was signed over the past few days to a WWE contract, something that has long been expected of him, something that basically since he's been working with NXT through TNA and in the Royal Rumble and in WrestleMania, we kind of figured he'd be there at some point. Now, I want to preface this with, I'm a fan of Joe Hendry. I like his work, I like his gimmick, I like everything about it. He's someone I enjoy watching. So take that as you listen to my opinions here. The first thing we want to talk about when we talk about Joe Hendry is the gimmick. Now, while I think it's perfect for something like TNA, or even NXT, or maybe even better suited for AEW, I don't think the current gimmick is what I would consider a main event level gimmick in WWE. And that's not to say that he can't evolve the gimmick and change it and become more serious when needed. The two men I want to compare him to, and I want to give examples as to where I think he could be and what I think the two most apt comparisons are R-Truth and John Cena. Now, you may be saying that's two different sides of the spectrum, two different placements on the card. Here's what I'm getting at with that. As of right now, Joe Hendry has somewhat of a comedic singing gimmick. And to compare that, I want to compare it to R-Truth, who raps, and John Cena, who really ignited his career by doing his battle raps. Now, one thing I want to take into account as well, as of right now, Joe Hendry is 37 years old. Now, that doesn't mean anything in the grand landscape of WWE. A lot of their main event talent is in their mid to late 40s. It's not quite the same as it was 20, 30 years ago when a guy in their 40s would be pretty much done. So that's not to say he doesn't have a good 10 years ahead of him. Why I bring that up is the comparisons of two guys again that I want to compare him to. R-Truth, when he came back to WWE for his second run after being K-Quick and then going to NWA TNA and becoming a champion there, he was 36 years old when he came back. John Cena was 25 in 2002, and I think it was about 2004 before we really seen the Thuganomics version of him. So let's say he was 27 when he really broke out. I think that has a little bit of a factor on how they're going to perceive him and how they're going to want to push him. At some point, they're going to have to go to a youth movement. You know, we see this year John Cena's retiring. Next year, AJ Styles will retire. Rey Mysterio probably doesn't have too many years left. CM Punk, same boat. Randy Orton, Sheamus, these are all guys that are older and have a lot of wear and tear on their bodies and have made a lot of money and probably would want to get out before permanent damage. Another reason why mentioning his age is so important. While I don't think it's the determining factor, I think it is part of the factor. You look at a guy like LA Knight for comparison as well, someone who's in a very similar boat and I feel would be a similar fan reaction. They've been kind of hesitant on pushing the button and pulling the trigger on LA Knight. So would that be the same for Joe Hendry? Now back to my comparisons. So you have R-Truth, very beloved, don't get me wrong. I love R-Truth, I love Ron Killings. He is an absolute treasure, definitely a Hall of Fame talent in my opinion. However, R-Truth never really broke into that main event scene. His biggest accomplishments would be the US Championship in WWE. In TNA, he got to be the NWA World Champion. And I kind of see that as where Joe Hendry is going to fall if he doesn't necessarily switch up the gimmick. Now, his singing, highly entertaining. He's a very good singer. He has some clever songs, especially when he makes fun of other wrestlers using songs. But there's only so far that can go. And let's say you put him in a feud with someone like Bronson Reed or Brock Lesnar or Braun Breaker. Is that singing a song about them going to convey how important that feud is? It might work on an undercard feud where you're playing up against a chicken shit heel or someone that has a little bit of a comedic presentation himself. Like right now, if he came up and he was to feud with Dominic Mysterio, it would be kind of good for him because I think Dominic could play off of that very well. Or Finn Balor even. Finn Balor could play off of that well. Or Shinsuke Nakamura. I don't think he gets into that Randy Orton feud level or even Sheamus or Gunther. These guys are just too serious. And yes, I get it. It would be cutting them down. However, you gotta look at the track record. John Cena as the Doctor of Thuganomics would have never been the 17-time world champion. Let's just face it. He had to evolve and move out of that character. Now, that's not saying that pieces of that character weren't still there, and every now and again he didn't bust out the Doctor of Thugonomics. It's just that he had to evolve it and change it. Same thing with someone like Shawn Michaels. Shawn Michaels, even though he had the sexy boy theme through most of his career, he had evolved past just being the chicken shit, pretty boy heel. And that's going to be the determining factor. Where can Joe Hendry take this character, and how long will it take him to get there? If he's 45 before he gets there, I think he's going to end up like R-Truth, or another good example would be a Dolph Ziggler, where he's someone that the fans enjoy, but he's never really going to be considered for the world title. The quicker we could get him into showing a serious side of himself, and I'm not saying that he doesn't bust out the guitar and have fun every once in a while. Look back at The Rock, look back at Kurt Angle. Those are great examples of guys that can mix in seriousness with the goofiness, even Steve Austin. But I do think he needs to up the seriousness. He needs to, within the first year or two, get into a serious feud, maybe with a Damian Priest or an Aleister Black. Rusev would be another great example. Someone that's going to pull out that serious side, that ass-kicker side of him, where yes, you cheer for him because he's funny and he's entertaining, but now you're also cheering for him because he kicks ass and he can back it up with that. I do believe Joe Hendry is going to face somewhat of an uphill battle. There are going to be things that are against him, age, his gimmick, the fact that he's not a WWE homegrown talent, which doesn't seem to be as huge as a deal now as it was at one point, but I do believe it's still a deal. Plus, there seems to be a logjam at the top of guys that are, let's just face it, older, that aren't necessarily willing to give up their spots, whether it be Punk or Seth Rollins, Roman Reigns, Cody Rhodes is even on the older side, Jey Uso. I mean, all these guys are a bit older than him, but he's still somewhat close to them. So can he wait out for all these guys to retire? Is he the next generation, or will that generation skip over him and go to guys like Obafemi, go to guys like Trick Williams, or even a guy that had potential, kind of got lost in the shuffle, and could potentially come back and reignite himself in Austin Theory? I hope to see it. Like I said, I am a fan of Joe Hendry. I think he has the potential to be an upper level star. He does need to basically break free and evolve. It's one of the reasons someone like a Colt Cabana never really became a main event guy, because he never really had that kind of thing on the main stage. In ROH, he did a little bit of seriousness, but he went right back to being goofy. I think he could do it, and I think he could build it there. Do I think it's realistic to expect it of him? With his age and with the time it might take to get over, we might be fighting an uphill battle here. So in my honest opinion, when I put all that into effect and when I think about it, is he going to be more John Cena or more R-Truth? I tend to believe he's probably going to be more of an R-Truth. An entertaining guy that's always going to make you happy, always going to send you home with a smile, but never really considered a main event guy. Which, don't get me wrong, that is a role that 99.9% of all wrestlers would love to have and would consider themselves extremely gifted to be there and extremely lucky to be there. I think too often we focus on championships and who's in the world title picture. The aforementioned LA Knight, people believe he's not getting a push because he's not a world champion yet. Let me just give you this as a parting words and kind of explanation as where Joe Hendry is. Roddy Piper never won the world title in WWE. Scott Hall never won a world title. Curt Hennig won the AWA World Championship, but not a WWE or WCW World Championship, and he won the AWA in what could be considered their dying days. Rick Rude won the WCW International Championship, but never the WWF World Title or WCW World Title. Same goes for Barry Windham. Arn Anderson was never a world champion anywhere he was. Tully Blanchard was never a world champion. Do you know what the one thing that all these guys I just mentioned have in common? They are highly respected legends of pro wrestling. And I want you to take that into your mind. When you think about a guy like LA Knight, when you think about a Joe Hendry, and maybe they don't ever become world champions, but that doesn't mean that they're not a Hall of Fame talent, that they didn't have an extremely great career. If you think of people, add some more to the list. Tito Santana, Greg the Hammer Valentine, two other greats that probably could have been world champions and probably should have been, but never were. Then you got a list of guys that were world champions and that didn't deserve it. And I'm not going to say that list here because it just would be cutting people down for no apparent reason. But I just want to leave you with that. Even if he settles in and he becomes the R-Truth of the next 15 years, that's not a bad spot to be in. We all love R-Truth. We all love Joe Hendry. And I've said his name like 57 times here. I can't see why he hasn't appeared. Maybe I have to sing it. Say his name and he'll appear. I believe in Joe Hendry. Nothing. Sorry, Joe, you must be busy, but that's my opinion here. I do think he's going to fall into the, basically, for lack of a better term, the next R-Truth role. What do you think? What do you think his upside potential is? What do you think his ceiling is in WWE? Do you think he's going to be more than that? Do you think he will be a world champion, a multi-time world champion, an all-time great? Do you think he'll be looked at as a Roman Reigns or Hulk Hogan type where he carried the company for a long time? Let me know what you think down in the comments. While you're there, smash that like button, hit share, all that stuff really helps out the channel. If you're on mobile and you see the little hype button, I would really appreciate you hitting that as well. With all that being said, my name is George Coles, and you've been watching Heel Heat.